All right, you guys, thank you so much for coming back to the show. I am so excited to have my guest today, Amy Berger. She has been in this space for a long time. She is a nutrition expert, has certifications that far exceed a lot of people in this space for nutrition. And she's written 3 books. We're going to talk more about her most recent book with Dr. Eric Westman today. But the reason why I wanted to bring her here is she has, I think this is trademarked also, Keto Without the Crazy. Is that right?
I need to trademark it. It's a very complex and expensive process. So if there's any IP or patent attorneys listening, you just give me a little shout out and we'll work something out.
Yeah, I love it. And that's why I want to bring you here is that, we were talking a little bit before I turned on the cameras. I feel like there's so much confusion and you've been around way longer than I have, but I see it too. If people are just like, I don't know what to think. I don't know what to believe when it comes to keto and low carb and this lifestyle. So if you wouldn't mind just telling me a little bit about kind of how you got into this space and your evolution of where you are and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, I came into this like a lot of people do. I was heavier. I used to be heavier than I am now. And I was never living with morbid obesity. I wasn't I wasn't that size, but I was heavier. And I was heavier despite doing what I thought were all the right things, right? I mean, I did a lot of exercise. I dutifully put my light margarine on my whole wheat bread and skim milk in my cereal, and I could not lose the weight no matter what I did. And I found the Atkins diet. That was my entry into this was the good old Atkins diet. And it worked, of course, low carb worked where nothing else had. And I I was fascinated by it. I mean, I didn't come from a science background, and yet I found myself so interested. Like, why is this working? How is it? I'm doing all the things that I'm not supposed to do, and it's working.
Mm.
And so I just started learning, reading more and more books, and eventually starting on my own to read some of the scientific papers to the extent that I could understand them. And I was in and out of a lot of jobs that I didn't like and didn't find fulfilling. And it occurred to me like, oh, nutritionist is a career. I could do that and I could help other people learn about this awesome way of eating. So that's what I did. I went back to school for nutrition, and I do this professionally now. But even though my personal entry into this was from fat loss, over the years that I've been learning about this, I mean, my first book was about Alzheimer's disease, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
So I, this way of eating, and by this way of eating, I mean keto or just any kind of carbohydrate reduction.
Hmm.
It's so effective for so many different things that weight loss to me now is really one of the least impressive things this can do.
Hmm.
You can literally put type 2 diabetes into remission. You can clear out like non-alcoholic fatty liver. You can get that fat out of the liver. You can normalize hormones in PCOS. Acid reflux goes away. People use this to prevent migraines. The list is endless. And like, oh, you also might lose a little bit of weight along the way, so I've just been so fascinated as to how all the other things this way of eating can do. Weight loss is really just one of so many other things.
Yeah, it's amazing. That's kind of, I got into this a couple years ago. I had actually done the Atkins diet. I guess it had a resurgence. What was that in 2005, 2000, around the
Yeah, early
2000s?
2000s.
Yeah, I did it back then and it was absolutely amazing for me. And then I kind of just gave up on it. I had reached my goal, and I was like, I'm good. So I don't need to do this anymore.
Right. Yeah.
And I was in my 20s. So it was like, okay, cool. And I just kind of forgot about it. And then here I hit, almost 40 and was struggling again with a lot of health issues. Like I got into low carb and actually came in through carnivore, which is a weird way to come into the low carb space because it's like you're basically coming into like nothing, and was doing it for health. Totally different reason than when I was in my 20s and wanting to lose the weight. And so I love having conversations about, I mean, I think weight loss is great. It's kind of what gets the headlines and the attention. but yeah, I had severe PCOS. I had horrible, horrible time with my cycle when I did get it. I had a myriad of health issues. I'm a yoga teacher that couldn't do yoga because I was in so much pain from inflammation. And so I love that, that you've done this work, that you're helping people and making it simple, because that's the biggest thing that, like we talked about a little bit before we turn on the camera, it doesn't get the clicks and it doesn't get the views when you say something like keto without the crazy, or like, I definitely want to dive into some of your, I guess, and I've looked through the book that you and Dr. Westman have done. There's so much great information in there. But I would love to really talk about, how do people keep this simple? How do they, um, filter out all that clickbait and all the noise when it comes to getting to the bottom of their health?
Yeah, well, I'm going to go back to something you said earlier, which is, my evolution in this. Like
Mm,
I kind of haven't evolved, but I say that as a positive thing, because
mm,
when you do something and it's effective and it works and it is simple, why mess with it? Why
mm,
try all these newfangled, shiny, ooh, look over there, look at this thing? People have been using carbohydrate reduction for hundreds of years. This is not new. Dr. Atkins didn't invent the low carb diet. This is people have known this for a long time. And when I was new, and like it kills me that people kind of badmouth the Atkins name and the
oh,
Atkins
I
diet
know.
now in the keto world, because I'm always emphasizing that anyone having any success on a carbohydrate restricted diet in like the modern age right now owes that man a huge debt of gratitude.
Mm,
I think that it's very misunderstood what his diet was about, and anyone that's bad mouthing it really has obviously never read his book or
yeah.
books. I mean, he had more than one book, because the new version of keto is really just the Atkins diet wrapped up in a shiny new package. It is.
Hmm.
So now that that's out of the way, yeah, I haven't evolved much, because what makes this diet effective
Mm,
for the most part for fat loss, for normalizing all the hormones, getting the blood sugar down, the blood pressure down, is the key tenet of the entire thing, which is keeping your carb intake low.
hmm.
And it was never about chasing macros or MCT oil, or like taking deliberate measures to aim for a certain ketone level. Like when you and I started early
Oh, there's
2000s, ketone meters didn't even exist.
no.
They had the urine strips and that was it. There were no breath meters, there were no blood meters, like there was nothing. You just kind of had to trust the process. And if you
Yeah.
wanted to measure urine, you could, but very few people did. And it worked for most people. Now, of course, everybody needs to tweak a little bit for their own, individual issues, but um, it's the real, just the key tenets are what make this work. And all this new stuff isn't necessarily harmful or counterproductive, although some of it is, and maybe we can talk about that, but it's
Mm,
just not giving you much added benefit beyond the single most powerful thing, which is keeping the carbs low.
yeah.
All this other stuff is just kind of, you can do it and it sounds good, but what is it really accomplishing compared to the real, what is flipping that biochemical switch from making you have a primarily carb and glucose based metabolism to a primarily fat based metabolism? That is the absence of the carbs.
Yeah. Yeah. And, one of the things that I've talked about a lot on my channel, and I've really tried to dig deep into it, is fasting. Because when, you and I were doing Atkins way back when, it wasn't really, I mean, I lost weight effortlessly almost eating, broccoli and chicken and cheese on top and all the stuff that's in the Atkins book. And I didn't do any fasting at all. And when I got into carnivore, it was almost as though the two went hand in hand. If you, are up on Instagram and all the videos and all the people talking, it's almost as though you have to do fasting and do carnivore. And I really screwed myself up big time. with fasting. I was like, oh, I'm going to do a 7-day water fast. I did. Yeah, I did. I made it 7 days and then was sick as a dog and couldn't figure it out for weeks on end and just decimated my hormones. And it was like, and then what I see a lot of people doing is that they start to blame the absence of the carbohydrates for the issues that they're having from possibly pushing their body too hard and doing too much fasting. So I would love to hear. I've heard you talk about this on live streams before. Your thoughts on this topic. I know it's like kind of opening a can of worms, but
It's the third rail. I don't know if I want to touch it, but fasting, like we were saying, when you and I were new to this, nobody talked about fasting. There was no, you just ate, and most people at that time were doing 3 meals a day.
Yeah.
Now, fasting, the trouble is we kind of have to define the term.
Mm-hmm.
To me, fasting is the deliberate avoidance of food when you're actually hungry.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're hungry, and not just a sugar craving, you're genuinely, truly, physically hungry, but you are deliberately not letting yourself eat.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's very different from like time restricted eating or only eating 1 or 2 meals a day. Because so many people on keto or carnivore, being in a ketogenic state or just eating a good amount of protein and fat, especially without the carbs, it's so good at controlling appetite and regulating appetite that you're just not that hungry, or you only get hungry for 1 or 2 meals a day.
Mm-hmm.
If you're only eating once or twice a day because you're only hungry once or twice a day, to me, that's not fasting. That is eating when you're hungry, which is frankly what we should all be doing. But I know that when you're out there in crazy food land, you can't listen to those signals because you don't know what they're saying. But yeah, if you are eating when you're hungry and not eating when you're not hungry, that's normal to me. That's not fasting. And I have no problem with that. That's one of the beauties of these ways of eating, is that sometimes, when people are new to this, especially, some people for the first time in their entire life, they can go 4 or 5 hours not only without eating, but without even thinking about food.
Yeah.
Without even thinking, when do I eat next, or what am I going to have for a snack, or so it's life-changing sometimes, and that's fine. But what concerns me is the longer term fasts. And I do have some concern with loss of muscle mass, but my concern, especially with women more so than men, is the psychological damage that happens when we get into the trap of thinking that fasting is somehow required, or we fast as a punishment for something that we may have eaten. Like, oh, I just went a little crazy and I had the whole pint of ice cream. I'm going to fast for 4 days to atone for my sin. Like that's very troublesome thinking. And with women too. So like you were saying, you think that fasting is required because if you're on social media, carnivore and fasting, keto and IF, keto and intermittent fasting.
Yes.
When I was new, it was just keto, or it was even just low carb. Nobody called it keto. There was it didn't go hand in hand with intermittent fasting.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be different if when women were fasting, during the times they were eating, they were really eating.
Mm-hmm.
There's just a lot of women who come into keto, carnivore, low carb already with disordered mindsets around food. And you can't fast for 3 days and then think that 3 ounces of chicken is your refeeding, or that's
right.
That's sufficient. Like it's problematic when it just, there's a lot of guilt involved. I was supposed to fast for 3 days and I only made it 1 day. Well, why are you even fasting for 3 days? Like, what are you trying to do?
Right.
It's adding a layer of difficulty, and especially the guilt and the shame that is entirely unnecessary.
Yeah. I agree. And I've heard you give some really amazing heartfelt talks about this whole food addiction issue. And I feel strongly, I mean, I know I have definitely have addiction issues. My audience is really well acquainted with that. I've talked about it extensively. But when you try to start doing something like fasting, it's going to make all those food addiction demons pop up to the surface, and like you said, you're trying to atone for something that you did earlier. And we normalize this as, well, you're doing keto on IF or you're doing fasting. And it just, I feel like so many people, like that's just one side of it, that they're hiding, their eating disorder is just kind of hiding in plain sight.
Yes, I could not agree more. These ways of any way of eating that has a label or that has, quote unquote rules associated, whether it's keto or carnivore or paleo or vegan even or
Mhm,
macrobiotic, whatever it is, these diets with names and
mhm.
rules tend to attract people that already have distorted thinking around
Yep.
food because they think, oh, this is my answer. This is my safe zone because I'm just going to follow these rules and it's going to be magical. But then my worry too is that sometimes people with very balanced, healthy perspectives come into this, and over time, their thinking becomes more extreme and more distorted. And I'm not calling anyone out individually, but people have to remember, and I say this as a reminder to myself. I have to remind myself of this sometimes. We only see the highlight reels on
Yes.
Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook. You're only seeing the good stuff. People aren't showing you how um, out of control they feel. It
Mhm.
looks like control on the outside because I haven't eaten in 4 days. And are you really in control of that? Or, I mean, it looks like control, but we don't see the fight they're having in their mind every single minute of every day. Should I eat that? No, I can't have that. Don't do this. Don't do that. It's like a war. And
Mhm.
frankly, more and more of the influencers, and I hate that word,
I know,
but
me
you're
too.
probably starting to see, because I see it more and more now, more and
Yeah.
more influencers are coming clean, so to speak,
Mhm.
about the fact, oh, I fasted a little too much and I got sick,
Yeah.
or I was having some body dysmorphia and I realized I was in a very unhealthy place. And it's a shame because we have come to idolize some of these people. We
Mhm.
worship at the altar of thinness. We worship at the altar of dietary purity because they make it look good until 6 months or 2 years later
Yeah.
when they come on their feed and they're crying and they're confessing, oh, I'm such a mess and I'm tired and and I don't, it's not like blaming anybody. It's just
Yeah.
showing how out of control this really is when it looks like everything's all good on the outside.
Yeah, 100%. And I've been there before myself. When I put myself out there, I didn't expect that my page would get as much attention as it did. And then it's kind of like, well, now I'm the girl who does carnivore and fasting, and I'm a yoga teacher, and I'm putting all this out there. And it was like the end of year one that my body just crashed. I mean, it just totally crashed. And I did gain weight because I quit fasting, and I did really struggle. And it's still a year later now that that whole kind of crash thing happened. And I've just, I've probably been the messy one to, to talk about all this stuff. But for you get the comments of the people are like, oh yeah, we knew this. But then for one of those, you probably get 100 from people who are like, thank you for actually coming out and being honest, because I was fasting and I lost my cycle, or I was fasting and I started having my binging behavior come back, and that it had been gone for like many years for me. And so
Yeah.
it's difficult to be, and I hate the term influencer, but it kind of has turned into that. But it's cool because I get to talk with cool people like you and have a podcast and do this kind of thing now. But there is a lot of pressure to uphold a certain image. And I guess what I've tried to do with mine is like, my image is kind of like, there isn't really an image. Like, I'll just be honest with you guys if something's not working. But it's also hard to like watch so many other people that you kind of can see once you've been through it, you can see like I kind of can tell this person's really struggling right now, but they have to uphold this image. And so they're just going to keep doing the thing that they're doing, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm starting to be able to spot it from further away myself. And I don't want to badmouth fasting,
No.
especially the intermittent fasting. Like, and again, I prefer the phrase time restricted eating because
Mhm.
the fasting implies some type of like deliberate, I'm really hungry, but I'm not going to eat. Um, I do think for some people that can help some
Mhm.
of the disordered eating behaviors because if you put a constraint on it, like I only eat between such and such and such and such times, it might help you have a degree of control. Or if you're
Mhm.
somebody that does graze all day and you're trying to get out of that habit, you can experiment, but you just have to be careful, be aware, be very self-aware, which is easier said than done, but
Mhm.
try to notice if you're creeping into territory that might be dangerous, whether
Yeah.
physically or mentally and emotionally. Like I think fasting or just skipping a meal here and there has a place. It does. Like
Mhm.
um I don't mean to scare people away from it. It's really the more extended fasting that I'm talking about. But even the time restriction can be a little iffy because
Yeah.
if you say, well, I eat between noon and 6 or 8 and 2 or whatever hours, but one day it's like 20 minutes before your window opens, if you're really, really hungry, or you're a grown adult, are
Right.
you gonna say, well, I'm like starving, but I'm not allowed to eat until 11 a.m. I'm not. It's it's after 7. I'm not allowed to eat again till tomorrow. Like really, I would rather that people learn to trust their hunger too, rather
Mhm.
than putting any arbitrary number on any of it.
Yeah, that's and that's one of the benefits I feel of this way of eating low carb, eating a diet without carbohydrates because for me, I have had a lot of healing that has come from just actually my body having satiation from getting enough protein, enough fat, and those things that I was really trying to restrict. I mean, I've done every diet there is known to man. I was vegan for 2 years because I'm a yoga teacher and I thought that's kind of like what you have to do if you're a yoga teacher. But I've done so many of them and this was the first time that I was like, I'm not hungry for snacks all the time. I don't have to eat every 2 hours. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah, I agree. I think that if you do any kind of fasting, it just happens. You don't necessarily have to force it. For me, I don't know about
yeah,
you, but I do have to tell myself, after I eat dinner, then we're done here. Because the night is the vulnerable time for me.
yes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that can be helpful also. Um, I want to talk a little bit about the book that you and Dr. Westman did, because I did look through it quite a bit over the weekend and this morning. And I was like, wow, this is actually super helpful. It's almost like a manual for people who really want to do this and keep it simple. The one thing I loved that your chart about learning your carb threshold, that was really awesome. Would you dive into that a little bit for people who maybe don't have the book? And that'll be in the show notes too, if you guys do want to go ahead and buy that book. I highly recommend it. But can you talk about the carb threshold a little bit for people?
Yeah, yeah, thank you. So our book is called End Your Carb Confusion, and it's exactly the title kind of says it all. It is I co-wrote it with Dr. Eric Westman, who's very well known in the keto and low carb and carnivore world. And this is the book that I would want if I was new to keto now.
Mhm.
Because when you and I started, it was easy. There when I started, Facebook didn't even exist. Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, that's how long ago I started low carb. These
Wow.
things did not even exist. And so there was a lot less information, but there was less misinformation. And I cannot even imagine being brand new to this now and trying to figure out what to do, who to listen to, how this works, because there's so much conflicting information out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And it's not that anybody's wrong. Nobody's wrong. It's just that different, depending on your situation, certain things are going to be appropriate for you and certain things might not be. Wanting to lose 200 pounds and having type 2 diabetes is a different situation than someone who's already lean and fit and is trying to maximize athletic performance. Those
Mm.
are two very different approaches to a low carb or ketogenic diet. So our book, we have this checklist that you mentioned, which it has all kinds of just things like hypertension, diabetes, obesity, migraines, hypoglycemia, and you check off whatever applies to you. And based on your answers in that chart, it points you toward a level of carbohydrate intake to start with.
Mm.
So we have three different phases. Phase one is a very strict ketogenic diet. Phase two is still a very, very low carb diet, but a little higher in the carbs. And phase three is the highest. And I'm not going to lie, most people are going to be pointed toward the phase one, the strict
Mm.
keto. Some people, if you're starting out already mostly healthy and you just want to stay that way, you will be pointed toward one of the other levels. But we also explain that even if that chart points you toward one of the higher levels of carb intake, you might want to give phase one a try for a few weeks just to see how you feel. Because, you and I both know, even if you don't have weight to lose and you don't have a blood sugar problem, there's all these other things that, like people, brain fog goes away, they have more
Mhm.
energy, joint pain goes away. So there might be reasons to do strict keto, even if you don't need it for metabolic health or to correct a health condition. You might
Mhm.
just feel your best there. And you'll only know if you do it. And you can do it for a couple of weeks. And then we also walk you through how to progress up if you want to. So, you can try it. And if you find that you don't want to be that strict, maybe you don't need to, but I think it's worth starting there for most people.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, just I always tell people that it really depends on what your health is like before you begin the way of eating that you're trying. If you're doing carnivore, keto, or just even low carb, do you have diabetes or do you have PCOS or insulin resistance? All the same thing, but having those issues, you probably would want to stick into that, I guess, that section one of your plan. How is this different from like the Atkins induct? I know some people are like, what are they even talking about? But like I know he had like the induction phase. How is this different from his plan?
It's actually not that different. So Dr. Westman, my co-author, trained with Dr. Atkins. Like when early on, he had two patients who, he was is an internal medicine doctor, and he was trained in all the conventional normal stuff. If you have diabetes and you're overweight, it's just going to get worse and worse, and we'll just adjust your medication. And he had two patients who came to him and had lost a substantial amount of weight, and all of their markers were better. And he said, what did you do? And they both had done the Atkins diet. And in Dr. Westman's own words, he says, I wasn't so overtrained that I wasn't curious, meaning
Mm.
he wasn't so fully steeped into conventional stuff that he wasn't willing to say, the Atkins diet, like, isn't that the diet that's supposed to kill you and clog your arteries? He said, oh, like I can't. One patient, you can ignore lightning striking once. When it strikes twice, it's like, what's going on here? So he actually contacted Dr. Atkins. They started a long-term correspondence, and Dr. Atkins died not long after that, but his nurse, Jackie Everstein, who was with him for like 30 years, kind of taught Dr. Westman a ton. So anyway, our plan is very, very similar. The phase one food list is based on the Atkins induction.
Mm.
I think it's actually a little bit stricter even because we
Oh,
don't
okay.
allow nuts. And like, I know that what everybody's freaking out. There's a reason for that, but so our food list is not exactly the Atkins induction. It's a little bit different,
Mhm.
but it's similar in that Dr. Atkins did have what he called the carb ladder. You
Mm.
do induction, and in the original Atkins plan, induction was 2 weeks. And then you gradually reintroduced carbs to find your own sweet spot of like, how much carbohydrate can I eat and still lose weight, still, feel great? Or, how much can I eat and maintain my weight without regaining what I lost and without triggering all these health problems to come back? Except people rarely did that. They either stayed on induction the whole time, or they just went from induction to like, oh, I can have carbs again now. And then,
It's over.
kaplooey, and they've regained 100 pounds. So our book, I mean, Dr. Atkins told people how to do it slowly. I just think very few people did. So our book, it gives you all the options. We make it clear in this book that it is perfectly fine to do strict keto forever if you want to.
Mm.
If you feel your best doing that, you can do it. But if you get to the point where, it might be nice to have a piece of fruit now and then, it might be nice to have potatoes now and then, do you have room for that? And if so, how can you work your way back up to that? We also explain, which is kind of my own personal diet. I'm strict keto most of the time. I'm always low carb. I'm always low carb, not always ultra strict keto. But what I like to say is keto is my permanent home, but I make occasional visits to higher carb land. And if you've been at this long enough and you have been maintaining your, a good weight for a while, and you're happy with your health, most people have the flexibility to do that. You can have the ice cream once a month. You can go to the Mexican place every now and then and get, eat the tortillas, eat the rice, but you have to know yourself too, because that's a really slippery slope.
Yeah.
If you're the person who, I'm going to have the rice and beans, and then before you know it, it's been 3 months and it's been just a carb bender ever since, then you maybe can't make those occasional visits.
Yeah, I know that Dr. Westman talked a little bit about in the book. I'd love to hear your take on this as well. It's just people with food addiction that should probably just never go back to carbohydrates. What do you think about that? Just as far as what you just said, do you have any more on that you would like to
Yeah,
add?
I think people, you have to know how you're wired, because
Yeah.
there really are some people that can have a handful of whatever and close the package.
Yeah.
I'm not one of them.
No. No.
But they do exist. And so if you are one of those people, that's fine. And it's sometimes food specific, because
Mhm.
there are, so like, for example, I said that nuts are not included on our phase 1 food list. And the reason for that is not that nuts and seeds aren't keto friendly or that you can't eat them and lose weight and do well, but they are such a common trigger food, such a
Mhm.
common binge food,
Yeah.
that it's easier to completely abstain than it is to say, I'll just have 1 ounce. Like if we said on the food list, 1 or 2 ounces are allowed, but you can't have 1 or 2 ounces. You're
Yeah.
going to have half the bag or the whole bag. Then, there's the abstainers and moderators. And
Mhm.
for me, I'm an abstainer. It's easier for me to have none than the minute I get that taste. Oh, just forget it. It's over.
Yeah.
It's game over. And so that's why the nuts and seeds are not allowed. And so for me personally, I can't eat pork rinds anymore,
Oh no, I
because
can't
pork,
either.
they're
They're
zero
so good.
carb. They're not zero calorie. They're not
Yeah.
zero impact on my body.
Right.
And yeah, my pork rinds, my serving is the bag. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter whether it's a snack size bag or the family size Costco bag. My serving is the whole bag in
Yeah.
one sitting. And so even like, just because a food is very low in carbs doesn't mean it's going to be okay for you to eat it, not you, but like, if you
Yeah.
have to know yourself, there's certain foods that I can't have because I have no off switch for them.
Yeah, I agree. Cheese can be like that for me too. I have to be really careful with cheese, and that's one of those things. Like it's such a slippery slope because like pork rinds, it's like an allowed food. Like you can have this if you're keto or low carb, you can have it, but I have a little bit of cheese and then I want like the whole block and then I'm like slicing it up and melting it on everything. And then before you know it, I'm like, why am I not losing weight? Or how did I just put on all this weight? It's because, you're overeating the cheese. I think that's
Yeah,
a
and
hard
this,
one.
people need to know that keto and carnivore too, they're
Hmm.
not magical weight loss diets. You can gain fat on both
Hmm.
if you're still overeating, or it just, for many people, eating this way does almost magically and miraculously correct appetite and overeating, and it's good to go. Not everybody. And so if somebody watching or listening is still struggling, you are not alone. You
Mm.
are so not alone. We don't talk about it enough, but many people still experience compulsive overeating or binging, even on keto, even on carnivore.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just additional strategies to help with the binge eating and the it's so much more common than people realize,
It
because
is.
sugar addiction, clearly, like, most people are addicted to sugar, whether they
Yeah.
admit it or not. But even getting rid of sugar and flour and starch, it is still entirely possible to just overeat and to binge on steak and broccoli. Can you do it? Yes, you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah, that's one comment, when I've talked about binge eating on my channel, I always get, the real smart person who wants to tell me about how you can't overeat meat, you can't binge on meat. And I'm like, you don't know the kind of person I am, do you?
Yeah. Yeah.
You just,
Maybe you can't, because I sure can.
yeah, I can eat
Yeah.
a lot of food. It's just food. It's almost like an addiction to just that full feeling, or just the eating, the process of it. There's so much about it that,
Yeah.
I think eating this way is tremendously helpful for someone who struggles with food addiction. But yeah, I really do want to talk to that person who maybe has been keto or carnivore and they're just still overeating, they're still struggling. What advice would you have for that person?
I think a couple of different things. I'll start with the good news, and I would say, in my opinion anyway, that I think, metabolically speaking, binging, quote, and it depends, everyone defines a binge. A binge to me is nothing to somebody else. So it just,
Same.
but yeah, I mean, so however we define it, overeating foods that are very low in carbs, metabolically speaking, is better, I would say, than overeating or binging on sugar and starch and garbage.
Mhm.
And is it still harmful to the body? Yes. Is it much, much less harmful than binging on stuff that's really overtly crap, frankly? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So at least there's that, you know. Other than that, I think there are there is a role for, like, CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy, and for talking like a psychiatrist or a psychologist. A lot of it is physical and physiological. It
Mhm.
is.
Yeah.
But some of it, we can learn new behaviors, we can ingrain new patterns. And sometimes, that has to do more with the behaviors and the processes than with the actual food. So I do think it can, and frankly, we really tend to badmouth and poo-poo medication in the keto and
Mhm.
carnivore world, but there are medicines that help with appetite suppression and that can help with this stuff. And I don't think that we should completely dismiss these things where they might be helpful.
Yeah.
Don't do it on your own, like work with the doctors that specialize in how to use these things. Um, but other than that, I just think you kind of, it gets better over time for most people. It does. And maybe over time is 6 months, maybe it's 5 years.
Mhm.
I think the behaviors do get better. It, yeah, I mean, I don't have any magical answers, but I really think there are some behavioral therapies that can help aside from the actual food. And then,
Yeah.
as much as we were talking about, fasting is one tool. For some people, being stricter is actually more freeing.
Mm.
Like doing like people that were binging on the keto cakes and the keto cookies and the
Mhm.
keto brownies, if they do the carnivore diet, all that stuff is no longer an option.
Yep.
So I know a lot of people with these binge tendencies do better on a carnivore diet than they do with keto. But you could do keto just fine, but stick to actual food and
Yep.
don't do the erythritol. Don't trade a sugar addiction for a monk fruit and erythritol addiction.
Yeah, definitely.
So there's, sometimes being stricter is actually, you feel like, oh, I'm not going to be able to do it, it's so strict. It's actually easier to be
Mm-hmm.
stricter, because sometimes that's so I went too far down the rabbit hole,
No,
bringing
I
it
love
back
it.
up to a more general level. A lot of people, again, it's not magical for everybody, but when people don't have the natural appetite suppression of ketosis, or when they still have a lot of the cravings for sugar and starch, I encourage them to be really strict for 3 or 4 days, like eat nothing but bacon and eggs, or nothing but steak and eggs, something that you know is zero carb, lots of good protein and fat, because there's a good chance that their version of keto was, like we were talking before, these weird newfangled, they're doing the bulletproof coffee, they're
Yeah.
having keto cupcakes and this and that, and they're doing maybe 50 grams net carbs. They're not going to experience the benefit of that really truly metabolic ketosis.
Mm-hmm.
So I think some people, when they get stricter, they do experience that, and it's easier to stay strict because you feel so good.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I kind of skipped over keto and went straight to carnivore, because I had read so much about benefits of a ketogenic diet. But I have a serious food addiction issue that I do work on outside of just the diet, yoga, meditation, and taking courses on trauma, and really trying to go deeper than just the food. But for me, carnivore was just satiating, and it took like the almond flour cookies and the nuts and all those things, just kind of took it off the table for me. And I did it with no dairy for the first 90 days. And it was almost like magic for me. I thought this is just too good to be true. And I think that can be really great advice for people. But there's so many packaged products now. There's so much like keto bars and keto cakes and keto treats. And I think those really, really mess people up.
Yeah, and I think, like we talk about on the book, not everybody needs keto. Not everybody needs
No.
a low carb diet. So if you're doing whatever version you've created for yourself and you're happy with how things are going, great. But there are some people who won't really experience all the benefits that we talk about unless they are really in that super, super low carb place where they are generating ketones, and it's a game changer when you get there if you've never been there before.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to talk a little bit about your thoughts on, because this is a new trendy thing now, the carb cycling, especially for women around their cycles and hormonal times. I know some women end up doing keto or even carnivore. For me, it was the lack of fasting and not enough fat that I needed to adapt in order to get my hormones back online. But there's a big kind of push, and I've even interviewed a couple people that say you need to do, for women who are of reproductive age, some carb cycling. I would love to know your thoughts on that trend.
Yeah, I haven't followed it much, to be honest. I think it any implementation of anything, whether it's fasting or carb cycling, or I don't even know what else anyone is doing anymore, but it's all about the context.
Mm,
What is your situation and what are you trying to accomplish? What is your goal? Because if somebody is 300 pounds and has
right.
type 2 diabetes and PCOS and whatever, skin tags and all these other things, they don't need to carb cycle.
No.
That
No.
person does not need to carb cycle. Can they? Yeah, but is it going to be helpful for them? Probably not.
Mm-mm.
Um, where people get into issues is kind of like we were talking about earlier. There's a lot of people doing keto who don't need it.
Mhm.
Young, healthy people who have been scared into thinking that this is the only way to be healthy, or that this is the best way, or this is the way to be healthiest. So you've got women who already, as a baseline, tend to undereat.
Mhm.
And I think where the carb cycling is helping is that they're probably eating more total food. Like women just, and I did 2 videos recently on this for my YouTube channel. Women do not eat enough protein.
Yeah.
Maybe on the carnivore diet it's different, but on keto, for various reasons, we've been scared away from protein. And so I think the need for carb cycling would probably be a lot less, or maybe go away completely, if these women would just eat more food.
Mhm.
Eat, that little deck of cards or palm-sized protein is nonsense. So if you would just eat a much bigger portion sometimes and give your body the nourishment it needs, I don't think we would necessarily have to carb cycle. And it's especially true for women that are exercising a lot. They
Yes.
really just, it's like in society, there's not a lot of people in between. There's people who have extremely, unproductive, unhealthy habits and never exercise and just eat whatever. And then there's people that are at the opposite extreme where they're exercising all the time. They never
Mhm.
stop, they never take a break, and they're not eating enough to fuel what they are demanding of their body. So
Mhm.
it's no wonder that they go kaput. It's no wonder the thyroid tanks and the adrenals tank and the hair falls out and they get fatigued and they get depressed and the skin starts to become crazy,
Mhm.
and they lose their period. So I think it's up for debate as to whether or not carbs are required
Yeah.
or if we could just eat more food. But that being said, I think carb cycling can work. And like, I don't think that having those carb ups every now and then, it's not going to be a problem. But again, it depends on the context.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I've seen people that, are fall into that camp of food addiction and they think I'll try this carb cycling and they eat a little bit of something sweet. And it's kind of like you were talking about with the nuts. It's like you get that taste in your mouth and then you're just completely out of control.
Yeah.
So I always kind of caution people with the carb, to add in those carbs. It's like, well, is that, do you think that's going to set you off? Maybe try eating a lot more fat first before you go down that rabbit hole and see if that helps. Or just like you said, more food.
Yeah. Yeah. More food. And I think, carb cycling is very undefined. Like it just, you can implement it in any number of ways. And I think I've had several clients that I recommended eat more carbs because
Mm,
not everybody needs the strict keto. And I think you can probably, if you're someone that thinks you do better with more carbs, or at least at maybe a certain time of the month, having a little bit more carbs,
mhm.
you can do your normal diet and then with dinner have half a sweet potato or have a serving of black beans or something. There's a way to introduce these more wholesome forms of starch without completely going, it doesn't have to be like, oh, it's my cheat day, so the
Yeah.
whole day I can eat as much sugar as I want. You can like more intelligently just increase a little bit of carbs. And frankly, at that amount, you're still on a low carb diet.
Yeah, you are. I mean, it's probably less than 100 grams, probably
Yeah.
even less than maybe 50 or 60
Yeah.
grams if you're just having a fourth a cup of blueberries or, half a sweet potato or a little
Yeah.
bit of rice or, it's like,
Exactly.
yeah, I think a lot of people hear carb cycling and they immediately think cupcakes and brownies and
Or like there's a whole day where you're just not on keto. Like, no, all
right.
you're doing is just eating a little more carbs than you would. But
Yeah.
it that depends because carb cycling, like in the bodybuilding world, it is a very different thing.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
definitely. Definitely. Yeah. The whole bodybuilding and that whole thing is just like a whole other separate world. It's, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to, I guess we're getting close to almost an hour, but one thing I really wanted to talk with you about is, the book opens with the End Your Carb Confusion book really opens with why eat less and move more just is irrelevant and bad advice. And just have you kind of expand on that for people a little bit more. Cause I feel like so many people are just told that, you're not losing weight because you're not moving enough and you just need to cut your calories. If you would talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. Before I get to that, thank you for bringing up the book again because I want people to know that this is a plain English, very conversational tone kind of book. It's easy to read. I hope it is. I mean, that's how
I
we
think
try to
so.
write it.
Yeah.
And yeah, like there's no scientific gobbledygook in there. There's no big jargon, but this is a great book if you're either brand new to this or if you've been at it a while. And like we were saying earlier, you are so overwhelmed and confused by all the mixed messages and you don't know what to believe and you're like ready to rip your hair out.
Yep.
This book can bring you back to center. It's the basic how this works, why it works, how to do it. And we absolutely do not fearmonger about regular conventional store-bought food. If you have the budget to support your local farm and get the grass-finished beef and the pasture-raised pork and all that, do it. I've worked on small farms. I love supporting that. Not everybody can afford that. And if
Right.
we say that that's required, we've automatically excluded literally millions of
Yes.
people who don't stand a chance to afford that stuff. We Here's the shocker. We don't even fearmonger about the seed oils, the vegetable oils, which I
Yeah, I
know is
saw
a
that.
huge hot button issue. But look,
Yep.
Dr. Westman has been using this in his clinic for 20 years, treating people. He's not some internet warrior, little blog person like me, he's the real deal. And you can't, like, even the Atkins book had nothing about that. You
No.
can reverse diabetes. You can lose weight eating regular ranch dressing, eating regular pork from the store. If you choose for whatever reason to not have those things, that's fine. But this way of eating can absolutely work if those things are part of your diet. Because
Hmm.
again, okay, we're telling people you're going to have to eliminate like 88% of your normal, no more cereal, no more bread, no more pasta, no more cupcakes. Oh, and by the way, now you also have to make every single salad dressing from scratch and every sauce from scratch. Or you're going to have to pay $8 a bottle for, special salad dressing like that.
Hmm.
You can't do that. And the fact is, you don't have to.
Mm.
People can have success on this without all that stuff. Okay. That being said, the Eat Less, Move More. I want people to know that this book is a little bit different than what they're used to hearing with the scaremongering about every last little thing going on
Hmm.
right now. So yeah, Eat Less, Move More. Does anyone watching or listening need me to tell them that doesn't work so well? Like, is that a news flash? Is that breaking news? Because I'm pretty sure I tried that. You probably tried it.
Yeah.
I spent 20 years trying it. So the problem with that, it sounds logical, right? If you put less fuel in and you're pulling more out, of course you're going to shrink. That's just math.
Hmm.
Except your body is not a calculator. The human body is not a
Closed
machine.
system. Yeah.
It's a system. It's a complex system with all of these interlocking, interweaving processes and feedback mechanisms and hormones.
Yes.
When you look at what happened to the people on The Biggest Loser, they
Hmm.
ate a lot less and they moved a lot more and they lost a lot of weight for a very short period of time.
Hmm.
All of their bodies, except for maybe one or two of them, rebounded and they regained basically all the weight, and some of them gained back more.
Yeah.
And it's because your body has a hormonal correction system. So you can eat less, move more works, but how long can you keep it up? And what happens when you can't keep it up anymore?
Hmm.
You're going to regain the weight. And so the beauty of if you do have to eat less, the beauty of keto and carnivore is that you eat less naturally because you're not hungry. There's
Hmm.
no willpower involved. There's no discipline involved. Like you don't have to white knuckle. I'm so hungry, but I can't eat. We eat less because we're less hungry. And I think the hormonal state being on a very low carb diet or a zero carb diet, because the insulin is going to be lower and the blood sugar is controlled, and we're tapping into all the stored fat, internally, we're not starving. It's kind of like a
Yeah.
complex concept, but David Ludwig out of Harvard University just published a study not long ago showing that low carb and ketogenic diets do not induce the same slowdown in metabolic rate that you see with other weight loss diets, with like calorie restricted diets. And I think it's because on a low carb or ketogenic diet, even when you're not eating, when you are not ingesting food, internally, your cells are eating. They're eating the body fat.
Yeah.
They're being fed. And I think that's why we don't feel as hungry or feel hungry as often. And but our bodies aren't starving. They don't have to slow the metabolic rate down because there's plenty of food for them.
Yes.
So that's people just have to understand that the calories in, calories out, eat less, move more, apply. It's physics. Your body is biology, not physics.
Mm.
So when you eat a lot less and you move a lot more, you do have a slowdown because your body's not going to let you get away with that for very long, or you would just
Yeah.
burn out. It's a
Yep.
protective mechanism to keep you alive. Your body's going to slow you down.
Yeah. I love that you just said the body is biology and not physics. That is like quotable, shareable. We need to post this all over the place because that, people are getting so frustrated. And the magic thing for me about eating high fat and taking the carbs away is that my hormones like very quickly came back online. I had lost my cycle and I was doing carnivore, but I lost my cycle because I was fasting and trying to do more of like a protein sparing, kind of carnivore, eating really high protein and kind of skimping more on the fat. And my body was like, no, we're not, we're not doing this. And I switched over to really high fat version, quit fasting, start eating breakfast. Within 2 weeks, my cycle came back. And it was like, it was that easy. That's all I had to do. I didn't have to go buy any magical supplements or anything or do some crazy workout. No, it just, my body was like, oh, we have what we need. Cool. We'll, we'll,
Yeah, I mean,
we'll allow
people.
you.
Do you know who Rob Wolf is?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, Rob Wolf, even before keto was big, when he was really just known for the paleo movement,
Paleo. Yeah.
he would have to warn his personal training clients and his nutrition clients that had PCOS or something, or the other end, the hypothalamic amenorrhea from being
Mm,
too thin and over exercising. And I mean, there are two separate reasons for having irregular or absent periods. He would have to warn them, listen, like if you're not using protection or birth control or something, you need to, because you will be very surprised at how quickly your fertility might come back. And
yeah.
Dr. Westman, I'm pointing over there because I have a copy of the book. He did some pilot studies on ketogenic diets for women with PCOS, and 2 women, despite previous failed IVF attempts, 2 women conceived during the course of the study after being on the ketogenic diet.
Wow.
So you really, and for people listening, that's not a guarantee. There's no promises that you would have fertility restored at all, let alone that quickly. But there's been some accidental keto babies
Oh,
of
yeah.
women with PCOS who were told that they are infertile, that they're going to need extra help, and they go keto, and lo and behold.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy. And I've seen people that I know even in the community that had struggled with infertility for years and went on low carb, ate enough fat, and were able to get pregnant. So
Yeah.
it's
And
it's
one thing I'll just say, keto aside, the nutrition myths that we have been fed, no pun intended, have done women such a
mm,
heinous disservice
oh yeah.
to scare us away from red meat when so many women are anemic or borderline anemic and don't even know it.
Oh yeah.
To scare us away again from eating a fully adequate amount of protein, telling us that little 3 ounce, that stupid deck of cards, I want to kill that old messaging so badly, or like to scare us away from fat, and especially animal fat.
Yeah.
It's so good for the skin, the hair,
Mhm.
the nails. I can't tell you how many female clients I've had who always had weak, brittle, stubbly
Oh
nails,
yeah.
and they like double their protein intake, and all of a sudden they have nice, long, strong nails. The hair starts becoming healthier. Um, it's such a huge disservice what this has done to us, but unfortunately, there's a lot of stuff going on in the keto and carnivore and fasting worlds that it's going too far in the opposite direction now
Agree.
too.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I love your message and the book that you guys have because yeah, there's just there's so much extreme on both sides that I feel like it is damaging to people and they can be damaging even in keto and carnivore and that space as much as it could be if you're following standard American diet and yeah, it's like I'm better now at 41 than I was at 31, hormonally, physically, everything is so much better. And people will tell me like, "Oh, you don't look 41." Like people don't believe me when I tell them how old I am. I'm like, "Well," they're like, "What's your beauty secrets? What's your beauty routine?" And I'm like, I eat a lot of fat and I don't buy skincare products. I have Fancy Farm is a company that contacted me and it's face cream made out of tallow. That's all I use. I don't have a special magical cream. And I wish I had known about this 10 years ago when I was struggling and just starving all the time and so tired and anemic. The
Yeah.
anemia is, I was able to give blood back in November. And I had always been so super anemic. So I was like, I wonder if I just go in there and, they're like, oh yeah, your hemoglobin's a 15. And yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
I would have never expected that after struggling with anemia my whole life, but I fell into that camp of like, eat less, move more, limit your meat, especially the red meat, stay far away from red meat. It's horrible. Definitely never use butter.
Yeah.
And
And egg yolks. I mean,
yeah,
it's,
oh gosh.
yeah.
Now, a lot of days I'll just eat the egg yolks. I throw the whites away because I'm like, I just want an omelet made out of nothing but yolks and cooked in butter, and it's delicious. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. So, well, thank you for this amazing conversation. This has been so awesome. Such a great, great topic for people. And where can people find you if they want to work with you or want to learn more about your work and what you do?
Yeah, thanks. My website is in desperate need of overhaul. So nobody judge me by the website, but it's tuitnutrition.com, TUIT nutrition.com. We've hit a little snag with the website. You actually have to put www.tuitnutrition or it won't come up. It's just like
Ah,
I have to fix it. It's anyway, I'm also on Twitter and YouTube. My handle on both of those is Tuit Nutrition. That's the name of my YouTube channel. Um, I'm on Instagram, same handle, but I barely understand Instagram, so Twitter's really my main social media home and YouTube. But I'm now involved with Dr. Westman is part of a company called Adapt Your Life, and we are
mm,
doing online courses now related
oh,
to
cool.
keto. So we have one coming up very soon called the Stall Slayer Masterclass, which is based on my book about breaking fat loss stalls on keto and how to do it without making yourself nuts about fasting and macros and counting. So that's at adaptyourlifeacademy.com. You can find the Stall Slayer course. And our first course that we'll be offering it again multiple times throughout the year is the Keto Made Simple Masterclass. So
Awesome.
that's ideal if you are brand new to keto or like I was saying about the book, if you've been doing it for a while, but it's not working, like you're not getting the results you want, or you would like a reminder and you would like help drowning out all the noise and just focusing on what this is and why and how it works. Doctor, that's from Dr. Westman himself. So you're going to get it the real deal, none of this new extraneous fluff that didn't exist 20 years ago. But yeah, adaptyourlifeacademy.com.
Awesome. And I'll link all of that in the show notes below so people can go check those out. And are you seeing clients right now or are you just doing the online courses and keeping up with
I
them?
do work with clients, so they can find that on the website. There's a tab that says work with me, I
Awesome.
think. And I can work with I'm in North Carolina, but it's like almost nobody local finds me. Almost everyone finds me online. So I work with people all over the US and internationally by Zoom or Skype.
Wonderful. Great. Well, you guys just make sure you check out the show notes so you can find Amy, look her up. I definitely recommend the book. I have it, and it's definitely something I'm going to be referring to even myself as I'm, not really doing strict carnivore. I've been adding some foods back in and enjoying that. So I think it's I was like, oh, this is perfect right for where I am. So thank you
Great.
again for being here today.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah.